Hi, this is Mileta Rien speaking to you from Woiwurrung Land, home of the Wiradjuri people. I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of the land on which I live, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. Also, Hilary, Indigo and I want to let you know that our conversation ranges over a number of sensitive topics, particularly mistreatment and erasure of Indigenous peoples, child abuse, sexual assault and suicide. Please listen with care.
Then you burst into fire. Forever.
Hello.
Hello.
You're listening to The Full Blossom of the Evening, a podcast about David Lynch and Twin Peaks. I'm Hilary.
I'm Indigo.
And I'm Mileta.
Listeners, we're going to tell it to you, and we're going to tell it to you straight. Today, we're talking about
Picnic at Hanging Rock.
I saw her smiling. I feel like I'm gonna dream tonight.
Well, listeners, you probably heard a third voice there. That is our friend Mileta. We have been talking over email for quite a while now. And Mileta, I believe you were the one that suggested Picnic at Hanging Rock as a potential topic. And when you did, I think I had said like I had been meaning to watch it for a long time. It was something that I had heard about a lot, been recommended by friends. And then when I watched it, I immediately reached out to Hilary and was like, oh boy, do we have a topic. Like, first of all, we have a new friend. And second of all, we have a new topic. And listeners, the more we talked about it, the more we were like, well, if we're going to do this episode, we have to have our Australian friend with us.
Well, it is lovely to be here, if a little bit surreal. I was describing it to Hilary as stepping through the looking glass, and I'm still having a slightly out of body experience being here with you. But yeah, thanks again. So, yes, I think I'd always thought of Picnic at Hanging Rock in association with Twin Peaks because of the scream. It's such a big part of the film, it's such an iconic scene in that. And that scene when it's announced, just before it's announced that Laura Palmer is being killed at school, and that girl just runs across the playground outside, and you never find out whether that's because she's heard the news or for some completely different reason. But that was always my sort of anchor between the two things. And then when I just came across a copy of the book in an op shop thrift store, and was reading it, and the more, yeah, I just kept seeing more and more connections. So that's when I emailed Hilary to suggest the topic.
Well, we are both so excited, and we also feel like we've stepped through the looking glass because
Oh, yeah.
seeing you here on screen and getting to talk to you with voices instead of text is really fun. And what a delightful journey Picnic at Hanging Rock has been for both of us, because I started with a novel and read it multiple times because I instantly loved it, and then watched the film. And Indigo, you did the opposite, right?
Right, which was something that we both talked about, because then I think it colored our opinions as too, which I think happens a lot when you have like a book to film adaptation. But it was interesting that this time we had this different approach. So the first time I watched the movie, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than you were able to on your watch, just because you are coming to it with these strong feelings and connections to the characters in the book. And there's obviously, listeners, there's quite a few changes, as there often are in book to film adaptations. But yeah, oh my gosh, because then reading the book, I did just do a rewatch the other night to refresh myself post reading the book, and there were some areas that you really lose from the story that you get in the book. So listeners, we, I think we often do encourage you to engage with both if you're interested and you have the time, but really with this one especially, I think the book is so fantastic.
I feel personally like the book is even more akin to Twin Peaks. It's more
Yeah.
Lynchian in a way than even the film is.
Mhm.
So if that's why you enjoy Picnic at Hanging Rock is for its kind of Twin Peaksy feel, oh my goodness, the book is such a delight.
Mhm.
So yes, it's such an interesting, different experience hearing someone who hasn't grown up with the film, because when I was a child in the 80s, it sort of got to that point where it was on TV every so
Mm.
often, and I would see bits and pieces because I wasn't old enough to stay up and watch the whole thing. So it was just part of the culture at that point, and a few years earlier, if and I'm sure we'll reference the making of documentary at some point, they talk about what a watershed moment it was in Australian film. And if you've gone to
Mhm.
any kind of screen studies film class, then it's just held up as this absolute pinnacle of Australian film achievement, which it
Mm.
absolutely is. But it's just, yeah, you just take it for granted. It's just there as part of the landscape. And so reading the book, it's impossible to separate it from those images of the film. They're just soaked into your subconscious. So it's, yeah, I'm really looking forward to discussing that from that fresh perspective.
Oh, that's interesting, and I didn't realize that about the film in Australian culture. I
Yeah.
love that. That's so, in our last episode when we were talking about The Wizard of Oz, that's how
Mhm.
The Wizard of Oz functioned in our experiences here as
Yeah.
Americans for generations. And
Yeah.
when you read the book, and now that's a children's book, it's far less complex. But again, you can't not see Judy Garland in your mind
Mm.
when you're
Mm,
reading the children's books.
mm.
Yeah, I think I also hadn't realized that it was the concept of it playing on TV. Like, I don't think that ever really reached the US in that way. I didn't really hear about it until I kind of hit my artsy Tumblr girl stage, and and I was getting lots of beautiful pictures from art films and stuff across my Tumblr feed. I think that's probably the first time I heard about it, and again had been meaning to get around to it for years. But that is so interesting, and that is why it is such a treat to have you here to give that kind of context.
Well, I'm also conscious that you have Australian listeners, and I don't want it to be too much
Hmm.
explaining the obvious for those listeners either. So I'll be trying to walk that tightrope.
Well, for those listeners who may not be familiar with Picnic at Hanging Rock, either the novel or the film, we'll start with a very brief synopsis. But it really is the kind of thing you don't have to worry about spoilers. So if you're not familiar with these texts, you can still fully appreciate them even after listening to our synopsis and our episode, I think.
And plus, I think with Picnic at Hanging Rock, there is a lot of mystery still, even by the end. And so, yeah, anything that I'm gonna say, I don't think it's gonna ruin it for you in any way. But essentially, the story that we're looking at in both the novel and the film, it follows a group of girls that go to a boarding school in Australia, and they have on Valentine's Day they have a picnic at a place called Hanging Rock, and a group of girls, as well as one of their teachers, goes missing. And the rest of the story is really just following that fallout, which is one of the clear connections we see with Twin Peaks, because so much of the series is just the fallout after Laura's death, and how it affects the town and everyone that is touched by this tragedy. And that is so much a part of Picnic at Hanging Rock.
This is one place where I feel that the novel is more like Twin Peaks than the film
Mhm.
is, because the novel Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay is really truly about what she eventually calls the Hanging Rock pattern.
Mm.
And it's this what you just described, Indigo, that what begins at Hanging Rock then kind of emanates throughout the surrounding space and affects all of these people who are more or less affiliated with the college. Some not at all, really, but they're still impacted by this disappearance.
Mhm.
Um, and that's about 85% of the novel because the girls disappear on page 32 of 204 in my
Mhm.
edition. Whereas the film spends about a third of the time on the picnic and the girl's disappearance. And so, with that much time in the film just focused on the inciting incident, it really doesn't explore this overall pattern and it doesn't resolve most of it.
Mhm.
After reading the novel, now I admit 4 times, and seeing the film 3 times, so much of the novel is how this pattern takes shape and how it ends, like how the different aspects of it resolve or
Mhm.
don't. And in the film, we really only see one of those aspects, and that's Sarah's death.
Yeah.
And everything else is just left open ended. And so I think that's the source of my kind of dissatisfaction when I watch the film.
Yeah, I would say on my rewatch, after having read the book, when I watched the film first, I didn't have any of that context. I didn't know anything about how deep the story went. There's
Mhm.
a lot of tragedies, there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of love, and I don't think that we properly get that in the film, because then they are strapped for time, because of how everything gets laid out a little bit differently, I think.
Yeah, so with the picnic in the film, that's obviously such a focus of the atmosphere of the film, and they're really looking at creating that mood and that sort of gauzy. Apparently, the cinematographer actually went and got different weights of bridal veil to hang over the
Mm.
camera to get that really sort of soft light. So that and those are the images that everyone carries around with them from the film. So it's
Mhm.
partly, I think, it's partly that just translating to medium, unless you're Robert Altman and you're having a multiple character sort of plot. Audiences really want to know whose story it is when it's a film, whereas in a novel you can get away with a lot more plot lines without it becoming confused. So I, that's something that didn't particularly bother me coming to the novel
Mm.
second, because with a
Mhm.
novel you just have the luxury of more detail. And but I
Mhm.
was surprised at how much resolution the story's got, like Tom and Minnie and
Yeah.
Miss
Mhm.
Lumley. That was
Mhm.
very satisfying to see, because she's so lonesome to
Yeah.
see her meet a justified end was that's a nice detail. And as you say, that's part of the pattern. I get a sense that obviously it's Joan Lindsay's pattern for the story, but because she talks about it as the hanging rock pattern, I got the sense that there's almost a supernatural intelligence that is designing all these little creatures different fates
Mhm.
and acting out a sort of pattern of their destiny.
Yeah, so I have a book club where we do page to screen. So we'll read the book and then watch the movie. And a thing that I have found in general is when you I kind of liked what you were saying about, like, you got more detail, and that was kind of nice and then satisfying in a way, and I feel you on that. I think that you do get that a lot where you if you watch the movie and then read the book and that's how you approach it. I think of it almost as like a director's cut or like a bonus scenes type of thing, and then that can be kind of a satisfying way to engage with the media because you yeah you're just getting this extra detail. And I think one of the things that was like a little bit different where you got a bit more information because Hillary, how you were saying that one of the characters that we do see the sort of fallout is with Sarah. And I really loved Sarah, and it broke my heart because especially in the book you get so much more of her too. I think you get more of her story and more of those interactions that lead up to her suicide. And even there's the whole bit about her guardian was just in a place where he couldn't get mail to her,
Hmm.
and he
Mm.
was coming for her literally like the next day. And so it's so
And
sad.
the drawing teacher wanted her to
Yeah,
come live with her. So Sarah had
right.
all of
So
these
many missed
possibilities.
chances, yeah.
Mhm,
She had
mhm,
all of these people that loved her, but just because of how the chain of events went, like Tom and Minnie didn't get the letter to her, the letter from her guardian didn't arrive in time. There's all of these things that could have prevented it. And you miss all of that with the movie. They don't go into all of that. And so I think that that was one of those things where it was like when I read the book, I was like, I would have never known this.
So, are we sure that Sarah's death was, in fact, a suicide? It feels like there's some ambiguity there.
I also had that thought, especially when reading the book, because there's
mhm.
so much more buildup, and it really, because I feel like they don't show the level of hate that Appleyard has for her in the film as much, because like in the book it's like every time they interact it's like she's seething. She's like, I hate looking at this little girl. It's like scary.
I thought on my first reading that Mrs. Appleyard murdered her. I thought she
Yeah.
threw her from the tower. And
Right.
and that's in part because Sarah in the book is described as the smallest boarder. She's the
Yeah.
youngest. She's very thin. So I thought, oh, she'd be very lightweight, right? Like in a rage, Mrs. Appleyard could throw her off the
Right.
tower. Read critical articles on
Mhm.
the literary critics have also said they feel it's unresolved,
Yeah.
whether it's a murder or suicide in the
Especially
novel.
because she hides Sarah's things. Like there's that scene where she like opens like a closet or a cupboard or something and Sarah's basket is in there.
Mhm.
There's like if she is covering up all of these things, it feels dark, it feels
Mhm.
malicious. Um, and again, it's just every single time that she interacts with Sarah, you get this little, description from Lindsay about like she hated the little girl, she hated her face, she hated everything about her, which again is so upsetting because there's so many people who love Sarah. So many of the other teachers like totally adore her. Like the drawing teacher loves her. The French teacher, is very protective of her as well. There's a lot of people who love her. I mean, the gardener who finds her, even like when he finds her, it's so sad because he says like, or Lindsay writes like he knew it was her because of her like her little body, like it couldn't have been
Mhm.
anyone else. And like and it's there's this such sadness and tenderness in that scene. I think he's so horrified.
And he
um
remembered before that scene what her favourite flower was as well
I
when he's talking
know.
with Mrs. Appleyard about what to plant. And he mentions her
Yeah.
loving pansies.
Mhm.
Yeah, like there's so many people who care for her. So the like malicious energy that comes from Appleyard towards her feels so bizarre at times. Like why is she making like she's making Sarah this almost like scapegoat for her
Mhm.
rage? Like she's misplacing all a lot of the frustration and rage she seems to feel about the whole situation. Like she seems to like blame Sarah or use Sarah as like a like a punching bag for her rage about all the ways that she's sort of impotent in this situation where she feels out of control and things are going wrong, and she's just taking all of that frustration out on this poor little tiny 13-year-old.
The screenwriter from the film Picnic at Hanging Rock, Cliff Green, in the documentary that Melita alluded to earlier, said that he thought the two themes of Picnic at Hanging Rock were first, the anachronism of Europeans in Australia, but second, and this is where I think the crossover with Twin Peaks is really interesting, the ill treatment of children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of both the novel as you're describing here, Indigo, and the film.
Yeah.
Then this ill treatment of children as a main theme of both, maybe all three texts that we're talking about today.
Mm.
Yeah.
And in the novel more so, although it is also part of the film, is reference to these poems that's intentionally, I think, murky. There's this Felicia Hemans, and then there's The Wreck of Hesperus. And those are by different authors. So The Wreck of Hesperus is by Longfellow. And Felicia Hemans wrote a poem called, I think, Casabianca, which Irma quotes in both the film and the novel. And both of these poems are about children who are doomed to die, basically, because of the hubris and selfishness of their fathers. And man, I thought that's so perfect for Twin Peaks as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
In fact, the end of The Wreck of Hesperus um, sounds like this could be Pete at the beginning of Twin Peaks. It says, "At daybreak, on the bleak sea beach, a fisherman stood aghast to see the form of a maiden fair, lashed close to a drifting mast. The salt sea was frozen on her breast, the salt tears in her eyes, and he saw her hair like brown seaweed on the billows fall and rise." I Once I read that poem and thought about how much it is a part of Picnic at Hanging Rock, I thought that could also be in Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So I'm just thinking about Sarah and why she becomes such a scapegoat. And I wonder if it's partly because she's associated so closely with Miranda. She
Oh,
shared a room
yeah.
with her. She was so close to her. And she's so visibly just destroyed when she loses Miranda. And I wonder if that's part of the reason that she attracts so much rage from Mrs. Appleyard and becomes the personification of this ill fortune. And not to say that Sarah brings her own fate upon herself, because of course she doesn't, but we've said several times that there are other people in her life that love her, and I wonder if the fact that she was so fixated on Miranda prevented her from realizing that other people were reaching out, so that she missed those opportunities.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, she is only 13,
Yeah,
I think, in the novel.
Yeah.
And she's an orphan
Yeah.
who's been in an orphanage and was clearly tormented. And so that might account for her being unable to read those loving gestures from others.
yeah,
Mhm.
Perhaps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think those are incredible points, Melita. I think I
Mhm.
really I agree with you heavily, and I see where you're coming from. Because yeah, I think it's that there's like again, it's just that she's such a complex character in the book, and I think that again, like that's one of those things where with film adaptations, when you're a little more strapped for time, I feel like we lost a little bit of her because she was really one of the the characters that I held so dearly when reading the book. Like I think that's going to be one of those characters that whenever I'm rereading the book, I'm just gonna, when I see her and stuff, I'll just be like, oh, my little Sarah.
yeah,
She is in some ways a Laura Palmer figure in
Yeah,
that sense too, that she really needs help. She's like kind of dependent on
right.
the adults in her world to save her, and they don't. And some
Yeah,
of it is
they
because
fail her. Yeah,
they're prevented from reaching her.
right.
mm,
Um, but that feeling of so many opportunities to intervene and save someone, and
Yeah.
then those opportunities are missed. So actually talking about this is kind of interesting because I think it's natural to associate Miranda with Laura,
Mm,
Mhm, mhm.
right? But there are some connections here with Sarah as well.
yeah.
Right. It's I mean, yeah, we have that, of course, the scene with Bobby where he's like, we all saw and we could have stopped this. We could have done something and stuff. And it's like that it feels that way with Sarah. I mean, they say that when Tom and Minnie find the letter and Tom realizes that he never delivered it to her, that they sit up all night feeling terrible and just thinking it over and feeling guilty. And yeah, it's just and we don't get to see um the what would happen when Sarah's guardian gets there. We don't get that scene of
Mm,
like the guardian arriving and being like, hey, where
Mhm.
is Sarah? We just get the letter, which is excruciating. Oh my God, when I
mm,
read that part, because again, that's not in the film. It's like when I read that, my heart just sank because she was not abandoned in any way. Like not only did she have the art teacher so willing to be a guardian for her, but her legal guardian like was ready to come get her, and it was so sweet. He was like, also, like, please tell her that I want to take her out shopping if she needs anything new, so tell her to think on that, and tell her, like, obviously he cared so much about her.
yeah. And
um
knew her, like knew that art supplies would be a
yeah,
priority, and had a sense of that
right,
she's getting older, she's going to want a more sophisticated dress. Like he was
yeah.
really invested in her. Yeah.
I think I actually like teared up a little bit when I was reading that because I was just like, no, like there were so many people that really cared about her.
Including
And
her brother, who
yeah,
is nearby. I mean, Albert, her brother, is I don't know how far is that distance, but obviously within a quick trip.
yeah,
And they could have seen each other even at the picnic if she had been allowed to go.
I
So,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like I mean that's the thing too is it's like there's all these like missed connections and like wrong timing like if things were off by just just a minute,
Mhm.
like there's all of these like tiny nuances. And yeah, I feel like I'm like even like honestly like getting a little emotional just like thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this book really hit me profoundly.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's so fantastic.
Yeah. Sarah's certainly the character that I related to the most.
Mm.
She's the poet, so I think that
Yeah.
she's pretty close to Joan Lindsay's heart as well. She's the writer in the story. And also, I don't know about you two, but I have definitely been targeted by a teacher who just had an irrational hatred of me.
Yes.
Someone who didn't even take me for class. I was in her roll call, but I was, I was not a troublemaker, but she would look up my results in her own time, like go to my academic records and look them
Mhm.
up, and then come find me in the playground
Oh
and
my
tell me off because my marks weren't good enough. Like she was really had a bee in a bonnet about me, and would she took one of my best friends for history, and she would rant in history class apparently
oh
when I
my
wasn't
gosh.
there about what a terrible girl Melita is. So there are teachers who are unhinged and will
Yeah,
get
there are.
fixated on a pupil in that way, and just they become the embodiment of something else that they've got going on in their private lives, I guess. So yeah,
That
Sarah feels very relatable and authentic.
And that really connects with those poems too, then,
Mm,
Yeah.
because then we've got these innocent children who are essentially trapped. In the case of these poems on ships,
Mm.
right? On doomed ships. But you're basically on the doomed ship of these adults' lack of
Mhm.
emotional regulation. Like you become the
Mhm.
target of all of this. And Sarah really is the main character of the novel in a lot of ways.
Right, because she's
Um,
our
yeah.
living girl, and, like
Mhm.
and Melita, I think, I'm so glad too that you mentioned, like, she is our poet too. She's like our Harriet Hayward kind of. She's our poet in this story, and she's just this, like, young girl who is interested in poetry and art, and according to her teacher is very talented.
Yeah.
And everybody else sees this I mean, like, that's why the art teacher is like, she's like, come stay with me, you have such a talent, I cannot let Appleyard take drawing away from you, she cannot take art away from you, you can really make something of yourself with this. And it is so excruciating, to see that kind of cruelty from an adult towards a child, who again, other people can see this innocence in. And yeah, it is just so bizarre. I also had a professor like that in college, and I'll just never understand that kind of behavior.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that you had that experience. It's awful. It's
Oh,
bad
I'm
enough
sorry
in
you
high
did.
school. But yeah, like you really hope that there's more adult interaction going on at college, and people who are teaching at that level have grown out of that sort of thing. But that's probably naive.
Yeah.
Um, there was something. Oh yes, I was going to say that those are the students that do often not fit in at school and
Yeah.
find their place in life later on. There's another book actually called The Getting of Wisdom, which is another
Mm.
story of uh, adolescence and coming of age and girlhood in Australia in
Mm.
the 19th century. Don't ask me which part of the 19th century. But yes, she is a not a much less likable character. She's a much less likable character. She's
Mm.
very egotistical, and she acts out in all sorts of off-putting ways, and she's very uncomfortable in her own skin, and she's just sort of trying on different identities and different ways of being in the world. And it's very obvious that the it's a highly autobiographical book, and the author is revisiting her most awkward period in life when she didn't understand herself. And so it has some parallels with
Mhm.
Sarah in Picnic at Hanging Rock, because she is such a fish out of water in that environment. But you get the
Yeah.
feeling she's going to be okay later on.
Mhm.
Um,
Because the college is the fish out of water also, right?
yeah.
The college is such a strange place.
Yeah.
It
Even down to
it
the architecture and everything, it doesn't belong.
Mhm.
That's a very Australian motif as well, especially for this period of Australian history, because it's just come at the end of the gold rush. And then there was economic depression after that in the 1890s. And so you've got all these massive sandstone wedding cake buildings that are just ridiculous pimples on the landscape, that where there was just this flush of money coming through the colony from all the gold discoveries, and that's petering out. And so you get the sense that Appleyard College is part of that last gasp of Victorian culture as well.
Mm, I love that.
So one of the articles that I read in preparation for this was Joan Kirkby's Old Orders, New Lands, The Earth Spirit, and Picnic at Hanging Rock. And she has this is a quotation from the article that I think fits really well with what you just described. She said,
Mhm.
the land is, quote, forced into relation with an external and alien ideal of order. And the result is an outbreak of inexplicable phenomena and preternatural experiences. It is though the earth refuses to be confined by an order or culture unnatural, even inimical to it, and forces seem to be unleashed by the earth itself in
Mm.
resistance to such schematization. But this awkwardness of the college,
Mhm.
of this last gasp, as you described, of Victorian architecture, is so important to this story, because this is it this blight on the
Mm.
landscape, this anachronism that basically causes the upheaval in nature that rebels against it? Does that make sense?
Ooh.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that is, there's no limit to aspects of Australian culture that you can relate this to. The first thing that I immediately think of in terms of imposing order is just at the level of the flora and fauna that Europeans brought, especially the English colonizers, brought with them on purpose a whole lot of European trees, species, and rabbits, and they really wanted to replant the whole country so that it would resemble home, quote unquote, as closely as possible. And of course, what happened is that the rabbits bred like rabbits, and they just became plagues. Same with mice. With mice plagues is still a feature of the country. The cats went feral, and there are terrifying, enormous cats in the landscape that just run rampant through the native animals. And then there's a documentary called Cane Toads. Are you aware of cane toads?
I am aware of cane toads.
They are the most and they can't help it, but they really are the most revolting looking creatures. And they were brought in to eat a particular kind of bug that was eating the sugar cane, and they didn't eat that, but they ate everything else. And now that the climate is warming up, they are also advancing across the rest of Australia, so that we've got that to look forward to in the milder areas. And that feels like, it feels like climate change is just the last logical conclusion of this series of insults to the landscape that we have been for the last 200 plus years. Also the sheep, and there was this slogan for decades that Australia rides on the sheep's back because wool was such a big export for us. But of course, like other parts of the world, cows and sheep have a terrible effect on the terrain. Sheep and cattle erode the topsoil so that it becomes less and less fertile. And this is already a very, very dry continent to begin with. So it's just a disaster at every level.
Wow. I feel as though both the novel and the film Picnic at Hanging Rock pick up on this idea of humans disturbing the natural landscape. Indigo, I know that's one of your favorite parts of the novel. Is
Yeah.
Lindsay's descriptions of those gorgeous passages about the humans disturbing the land.
Yeah, because it's just it's so true, and it's so, I think what Lindsay taps into that I really appreciated was the selfishness of humans,
Yep.
and the like the ego of just believing, because there's a couple different lines where Lindsay has the characters saying, like, we're the only ones that matter, we're the only living creatures, we're the, all of these
Oh, I
things.
have that one.
Yeah.
Edith says, except for those people over there with the wagonette, we might be the only living creatures in the whole world, said Edith, airily dismissing the entire animal kingdom at one stroke. And then the paragraph that follows is all about, all the insects and the plants and everything that she's missing. There's this huge life happening right beneath their feet and all around them. But as you described, the kind of arrogance and oblivion to that.
And that's so beautifully brought out in the film with all the close-ups of
Yes.
the ants and the pink cake icing.
Mhm.
And that was one of the things reading the book that really struck me the first time was it made me think immediately of the David Lynch's close-ups of the ants at the beginning of Blue Velvet.
Absolutely. And when we think about it in relation to Twin Peaks, like this whole theme of humans disturbing the landscape. I mean, in the original series, we have that threat to
Yeah.
Ghostwood, right? Or of Ghostwood Estates to
Right.
the forest. But even one thing that's always struck me about the opening in the original series is it's beautiful. The whole sawmill
Yeah.
imagery is beautiful, but it's also a violence
Mm.
Yeah.
against the natural world. Like all of those blades, those teeth,
Right.
that's all about taking nature and twisting it to our purpose, to our need. Um,
Right.
so it is such a subtext in Twin Peaks as well.
But there's obviously such a deep spiritual dimension to that as well, which Twin Peaks comes to grips with, often clumsily, but at least they make an effort at addressing that, whereas it's much more of a subtext in Picnic.
You know, in Twin Peaks The Return, that rift between man and nature becomes even more pronounced with the Trinity test, with
Yeah.
the
Mm,
invention of the atom bomb. It's like there is no, perhaps no greater offense to
Yeah.
nature than the invention of the atom bomb. And it's so in Picnic at Hanging Rock, there does feel like there's a healing between humans and nature when the girls fall asleep on the rock. So right before the girls disappear, it describes that there's this procession of beetles going across Miranda's ankle. There's a horned lizard that emerges from a crack to lie within the hollow of Marian's outflung arm. And in Lindsay's words, it says, "Everything, if only you could see it clearly enough, is beautiful and complete. The ragged nest, Marian's torn muslin skirts fluted like a nautilus shell, Irma's ringlets framing her face in exquisite wiry spirals, and so forth." It's this beautiful image in harmony with nature, and that's when the girls disappear.
mm,
Right, because they are able to connect with it
Hmm.
finally. Because I think it's so withheld from them whenever they're at Appleyard, because they're in this extremely man-made blight in the ecosystem that they are in, and now they are getting into the land. Because that's the other thing too, right? Is like they separate themselves from the picnic party. There are all the other
mm,
students that stay together in the main picnic area, sort of, and then these girls have chosen to go off further into nature and to get closer to nature, and then they
And
are
to
able.
remove their shoes and socks, stockings,
Yeah,
mm,
and corsets, even.
mm.
yeah,
Except for Edith, right? Edith
yeah.
stays all bundled up, and is that one of the reasons she is not taken away?
Right,
Um,
because while it does send Irma back out, it does not let Edith get in at all.
hmm
Like, Edith doesn't pass that test at all. She's so not able to connect with the land in that way. So that she it doesn't have any sway over her in
hmm
the way that it
hmm
does on the other girls.
But that, if that represents almost a healing of this
Yeah.
rift, even a temporary one, it's almost as if what happens in Twin Peaks: The Return with the atom bomb, right?
Mhm.
The rift that that causes will take a lot more to heal.
Yeah.
Um, and so if we have like Laura's scream, Carrie Page Laura's scream at the
Yeah.
end of the series, you know, is that the beginning of the healing, or is that an expression of the continuing rift with the natural world? Those are
Mhm.
interesting things to think about, maybe.
Yeah, I feel that that rift in Twin Peaks is something that just can't be repaired, that that's irrevocable.
Mm.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I think that the fact that the girls disappear comments on the fact that there's no way of comfortably straddling these two worlds. You have to choose
Yeah.
between just being completely absorbed into the natural world or going back into this very artificial human world. And I would be remiss, I just need to backtrack to the comment about no living creatures, which I think is a really significant quote in the novel and
Yeah.
the film. And there was this concept, I'm not sure where it originated, but it still comes up in Australian concepts of colonialisation, this concept of terra nullius, this idea that there
Mhm.
was no one living here before European colonizers, when of course it is
Mhm.
the oldest continuous civilization on Earth that was in harmony with the natural world for literally millions of years. But
Yeah.
because it didn't have a recognizable, you know, evidence of civilization, quote unquote, when the colonizers arrived, they just assumed that there was nothing there. Um, there just aren't words for the obscenity of that. And
Right.
one particular, I was talking to Hilary about one feature of Australian history is stupid Australian, especially white men, going into the landscape either with the wrong supplies or not enough supplies, and getting lost and disappearing. And explorers had a terrible time, usually because they wouldn't listen to the indigenous people around them if they even were aware of them, weren't actively genociding them. And yeah, so that's part of the phenomenon of people disappearing into the landscape, is this refusal to meet it on its own terms.
That's a wonderful transition to something I wanted to talk about, because one of the things that we learned, Melita, was reading about Picnic at Hanging Rock, was that it is like a phobia or a fear in Australia of being absorbed by the land. And we asked you for confirmation on that, and you said it
Yes.
is true, right? That is a kind of paranoia. But I'm interested in this idea. I think we're both interested in this idea that the land literally absorbs people, like without a trace.
Yes, I think partly because there's so much of it, especially in the outback desert regions where there are just these vast swathes of um, unpopulated or barely populated land. Again, partly because the indigenous tribes who used to live there have often been moved on, which is a polite euphemism for what happened there.
Mhm.
And so it's terrifyingly easy. I mean, it's yes, it's paranoia, but also it's very possible if you wander out there by yourself without enough water, and or you get bitten by a snake, or a spider, or any number of other things that want to kill you. It does get exaggerated, this idea that everything in Australia wants to kill you, and that you just step outside your front door and immediately like things are dropping from the sky attacking you. And it's really not like that. Even in the bush, like if you make noise, the snakes don't want to encounter you. If you stomp around when you're approaching, they will get out of your way. Like there are some common sense steps you can take to not get killed by the flora and fauna, but yeah, it just takes a bit of research and common sense. And that's often why tourists run afoul of it, because they are either not told or don't avail themselves of the necessary information. So I just needed to put that public service announcement in defense
I think
of,
that's appreciated. You need to
yeah,
push back on the prevailing narrative that
Yeah.
somehow Australia is this deadly place.
yeah.
Yeah. I
And the
do
I
see
whole,
see.
that. I see that discourse online that people are like, I'd never go to
Oh,
Australia.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that's
They'll be
very,
like, they've
yeah.
got spiders the size of cats. I'm not going there. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those aren't the venomous ones though. I mean, they have poison, but they can't necessarily. They don't have that fangs to attack humans. Like huntsmen are enormous and they look scary, and they might
Yeah.
jump on you, which isn't great, but they can't actually hurt you. So yeah.
The idea of being harmed, the idea of an unprepared human being harmed in nature is probably universal. And what I thought was so interesting and unique about the Australian fear that we read about was that the land would absorb you itself, and it felt very resonant with Picnic at Hanging Rock, right? That the girls might be actually absorbed into the
Yeah.
rock in a way. Because I think that we've all heard stories about hikers who go off the Appalachian Trail, for example, and die, but their
Yeah.
remains are found, or their
Right.
belongings are found. Some
Yeah.
trace of them exists. But the notion of just being wholly absorbed into the land, that's very rare here.
Yeah.
um, I know that Melita, you pointed out like that we have the Bennington Triangle. There were a couple of disappearances in Vermont around that. There's the story of the Lost Boys of Hannibal, which is in Missouri, that they went into a cave system and were never found, despite this enormous search and everything. No trace of them was ever found. So there are like isolated incidents of it, perhaps here, but for the most part, like the idea that, that you will vanish into the land and no trace of you will be found is not
Right.
common. It's not common.
Yeah.
And
And I
yes,
mean,
it was something that I was struggling to even articulate to you when we were discussing it, because it's such an intrinsic part of the Australian psyche that it's not something that you really consciously examine. I think it's partly because growing up here, you are constantly being lectured about the dangers, swim between the flags and don't wander off into the
mm,
bush by yourself, and you're always very aware of this possibility of, yeah, being absorbed by the landscape one way or another. I just need to get to the end of my fauna rant. There's a bit of discussion at the moment in Australia about the concept of shark infested waters, and it's
mm,
like they're not infested waters; they're just sharks hanging out in their home, and
right.
we're wandering in there, and then there's shark infested waters, and there have been like Jaws like um campaigns, like war campaigns, to go and get that shark that got this particular
Mm.
surfer, and it's just, yeah, ridiculous. So I just had to get that off my chest as
Yeah,
well.
we are the
Yeah.
intruders in their
Right.
homes. You
Exactly.
know?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
and
if there are
that,
more sharks closer to shore, it's because climate change is changing the tides. So
right.
Mm.
Right.
yeah,
And also because I mean that like that's another thing where it's like we as humans too, it's like yeah, we're not only encroaching on their habitats, but we're making it the areas that are usable to them smaller and smaller all the time.
yeah,
And so then where are they supposed to go?
exactly.
Where do they have to go? And again, that's just such an arrogance of man to just be like, oh well, like they're in my space, they're infesting my space and stuff, and it's like no, we're the like we're the pest, we're the issue.
Yeah,
um and so yeah, so that is to bring it back, that is one of the things I loved so much about Picnic at Hanging Rock was just um Lindsay's reverence and respect, I think, for nature comes across quite well in the book. And this, again, that constant reminder of like, we are not the only beings on this planet. There is a lot more at play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. But when I think about this idea of getting absorbed into the landscape and whether it's paranoia or not, and
Mm,
the more I think about it, it's like, well, I can't actually cite off the top of my head any historical cases of this happening. I think that when the whole Azaria Chamberlain case happened, how are you familiar with that? The
I
baby who
don't
got
think.
taken by
Yes.
dingo. Yeah.
The dingo ate my baby.
Yes,
Oh, oh
which
my
Which
was
God.
was which was parodied on Seinfeld.
That's where that comes from. I
yes,
never knew.
it's a punchline, which is
Terrible.
I have so much to say on this,
Hmm.
because I think that part of the reason that there was this national hysteria around this case is it played into that fear, but and maybe that was why there was so much frenzy to blame the mother and say, oh, it was a we didn't get much satanic panic here that I'm
Hmm.
aware of, but that was definitely an outbreak of it. It's like, oh, they from this small religious sect and they took the baby out into the wilderness to sacrifice
Mm,
it. And it had genuinely, the little girl had genuinely been taken by a dingo, and they did find the baby clothes, and there was plenty of evidence that that's what had
Hmm.
happened. But by then, the narrative had just taken off, and this poor mother, Lindy Chamberlain, spent years in jail, and there were
oh my
appeals. There's an
gosh.
amazing book about it called Evil Angels, which I got turned into a movie with Meryl Streep, which I
Mm,
haven't seen, but definitely read the book, because yeah, if you want to just howl with rage at police incompetence,
mm.
then that's a great text for it. But yes, it was out at Uluru, and so it there was a sense of white Australians just completely out of their element there. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I think maybe that's partly why there was such a frenzy to blame the mother, because it was preferable to thinking, well, you
Yeah.
can leave your child in a tent unattended for a few minutes and this can
Mm.
happen. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Melita, in the notes that we prepared together for this episode, you wrote quite a bit about this vanishing, this absorption, and that, that the picnic at Hanging Rock touches on a core colonial anxiety related to the horror of erasure. I love that language that you
Mm.
used. But you mentioned that Tom Wright points out that missing children don't just die in the landscape, they could be completely annihilated by it. And you quoted him to say the vastness of the landscape and the nature of the terrain meant that you could lose sight of the thing that kept you civilized very quickly.
Mm.
And that feels extremely relevant to Picnic at Hanging Rock to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
That the girls just have to climb up a little ways from the picnic, and then they have lost sight of the things that kept them civilized. It's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that feels very fairy tale as well, that Mrs.
Yes.
Oh,
Appleyard, the
yeah.
first time we see her, she delivers this warning about don't go and explore on the
Mhm.
rock, it's very dangerous. And they do the classic fairy tale thing where they go
Yeah.
against that advice, and immediately the thing that has been warned about happens. So yes.
Yeah, I mean they're barely out of
Yeah.
sight of the picnic.
Right. I
Yes,
mean, yeah, they're
exactly.
like looking up at there are I mean in the movie it's like there's some shots where you can kind of see that they have a decent view of the rock from their picnic area, and yet they've just gone out of sight.
And
And
Marion is looking down at them when she
right.
delivers her line about, what are those people doing down there, like living with no
Right.
purpose.
Mm.
She can see them, and she is
Right.
already out of the reach of civilization somehow.
Yeah.
Do you feel that this also resonates in Twin Peaks? I think it does, particularly in The Return.
Mm.
I feel as though, in the original series, we got lots of interstitial shots of the landscape and of the mountains and everything. But by the time we get to The Return, those don't feel interstitial to me anymore. It's
Mm.
almost like the woods
Mm.
loom as a kind of character in themselves. Like they
Mhm.
have a very strong presence. Even the way when the sheriff's station in
Mhm.
The Return, when they're in the conference room, it's almost as
Yeah.
if the woods are coming into that conference room. The trees are like right up against the windows now.
Yeah, there's a
And
real sense
Yeah.
of like the sun setting behind the
yeah,
trees whenever
Yeah.
you're there.
it's so beautiful. Like it's clearly a wholesome place, right? Like
Mm.
nature has approved of this space. But then there are other places where nature feels different. The
Yeah.
natural world feels more antagonistic to what's happening. And I think that Jerry Horn, it's very humorous the way he
Mhm.
gets absorbed into the landscape temporarily, perhaps. But I feel like this goes perfectly with Picnic at Hanging Rock.
Yeah.
He's almost like the Irma of Twin Peaks: The Return.
Yeah.
He vanishes into the woods, and then how many hundreds of miles away is he
He
when he
gets
finally
spat out
emerges?
Yeah.
again.
Naked
Yeah.
too,
Right.
without his
Yeah.
corset.
Yeah, they're like, "Bleh, I don't want that." Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, kind of bringing it back to psychic self-defense, that I still think about that concept of, like, the overstory of a place,
Mhm.
um, like, these places that kind of, there's like this echo that remains, where it's just sort of holding that the things that have happened there and holding these emotions and sort of reverberates out. And I think that that's the thing, is it's like Twin Peaks, the place, is like a character, and Hanging Rock itself is also quite like a character. Whether we understand them or not, it seems have some sort of motives, and they have these echoes again, and just a feeling. I think they both carry a feeling.
Yeah, I think that the shots of the wind in the trees that
Mm.
recur in the original Twin Peaks, that's real an expansion in the third season, and
Yeah.
I feel like partly that's just maybe a bigger budget and also cameras that can move more
Mm.
freely. And that David Lynch is just really taking advantage of that ability to give the sense of the woods much more of a like a larger brooding quality. And to me,
Mhm.
that gives a sense that's very similar to the rock as like a watching presence. You really get a
Mm.
feeling of it hanging over these people, and the sense that maybe in the way that Marion talks in that, is it Marion? Talks about the human beings maybe are carrying
Mhm.
out this pattern that they're unaware of themselves, and or performing a function that they're unaware of themselves. And that feels, it feels in both of those texts that there's a bigger pattern, that everyone is just part of this dance whether they know it or not.
Mhm.
And Marion's ability to detach in that way and to see human beings kind of as an observer, it
Mhm.
really echoes the way Greta McGraw. It might be in both the film and novel, but definitely in the novel, where she talks about like, oh, such useless motion that humans put
Mhm.
themselves through for amusement. How silly of us. She also has that detached perspective. They're both mathematicians as well,
Yeah.
so they have this very theoretical perspective. And I like thinking that that's what also grants them passage
Yeah.
through. It's that detachment. Whereas people like Irma, um, although Edith is the one who's always in shoes.
Mhm.
Um, but Irma is very sophisticated and worldly and very European
Right.
in the novel. Or that's really neutralized in the film quite a
Mhm.
bit. But what makes her a distinct character is just how sophisticated, worldly European she is. So it makes perfect sense that she would not become part of the rock,
Right.
the way that the other three do.
Yeah, I think that the novel does gesture at that sophistication when she's talking to the horseman whose name I'm going to struggle to remember.
Albert or
No,
Mr. Hussey?
thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Hussey. So they're talking about their watches, and Miranda's
Yeah.
saying that she won't wear her little watch over her heart because she couldn't stand the
Mhm.
ticking over her heart. And Irma says very flirtatiously, "I'd wear it always, even in the bath, wouldn't you, Mr. Hussey?" And it feels like
Mhm.
she's enjoying making him feel a little bit uncomfortable in that situation.
Yeah, but
I
also
know.
that's like such a great example of the of her materialism,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that because like she, like I mean these girls are at this boarding school and stuff like they've generally got money, but like Irma especially does. Like she comes from a very wealthy family and she is used to living well. She is used to having so much money and material objects at her disposal. And so, but we've got Miranda, who, like, even though her family has money, she's still of the land. And so
Mhm.
she's able to connect with it because like again she's like yeah I don't like wearing this expensive watch that I
Mm.
have because it feels weird on my body, like she is able to disconnect from the material colonized world in a way that Irma can't, which is why I think like but Irma has a good heart, and so it's like I think
Mhm.
that's like it allows Irma in where it doesn't allow Edith in. It allows Irma in, but it does not keep her.
Mhm.
I love that line in the book about Irma, about her wishing that everybody have their choice of cake,
Oh,
because
I
I
have
think
that marked as well.
her big heart is what really connects her to the landscape, because
Yeah.
that's her kind of that's her authenticity, is her emotional generosity to other people and her
Right.
empathy.
Yeah, and it says it gestures toward her future,
Mm.
right? That
Mhm.
later it would find expression in fantastic handouts from an overflowing heart and
Yeah.
purse, no doubt acceptable to heaven, if not to her legal advisors.
Yeah.
Handsome donations to 1,000 lost causes, lepers, sinking theatrical companies, missionaries, priests, tubercular prostitutes, saints, lame dogs, and deadbeats all over the world. So that's Irma. When she grows up and becomes a countess,
Mm.
she's got, this big heart, this desire for everyone to have their choice of cake
Yeah.
Yeah.
continues. But Indigo, you mentioned Miranda is connected with the land, and that is a big part of the novel. That
Yeah.
she's what's called a bush girl.
Mhm.
That her parents are um, one of the first pioneer families in Queensland, and she is
Mhm.
deeply connected with the land. And she's so excited for the picnic because it's going to feel like she's at home. She's out in
Yeah.
nature again. And I do not feel that that's something that the novel, or I'm sorry, that the film conveys.
Yeah,
Um,
and I would agree with you on that. I think that she's made out to be a lot more glamorous in the movie than she is in the book. We have the Botticelli Angel line, which was something you and I had talked about, where they keep the line in the film, which that line is in the book, but in the film they show a picture of Venus
yeah.
whenever they're talking about the Botticelli Angel, which is not really what we feel Lindsay was going for, because Botticelli Angels are a lot more androgynous and they have a lot more motive and agency than Venus.
Yeah, their faces are I'm quoting my daughter on this because I
Mhm.
had her have a look at it and just tell me what she thought of the difference between the Botticelli angels and the birth of Venus that keeps showing up in the film. She has not seen Picnic at Hanging Rock, so this
Mhm.
was removed from that. And she said, "Oh, the angels' faces are compelled by something.
Mm,
They are
mhm.
always they're
Interesting.
active and they are compelled, whereas the Venus face is utterly passive."
Yeah.
Um, and I thought, what an important distinction that from the novel's characterization of Miranda, she is much more the former. She
Yeah.
is active, compelled, kind of engaged with her surroundings, and she is not the passive
Right.
Venus at all.
Mm.
And really struck by that choice. And that's in part because Martin Short, who was like artistic director on Picnic at Hanging Rock, he had such a phenomenal attention to detail. And it really pays off for careful viewers because you'll see little pansies tucked here and there. You'll see little
Mhm.
swan figurines. I mean, it's delightful, all these little details. And
Mhm.
that was all his advice. And
Yeah.
but so then why this?
Right.
Why this substitution of the
Yeah.
Botticelli Venus for
Right.
the Botticelli Angel? Where
Right.
the angel fits so much better Miranda's character.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a really interesting question, especially since, as we've talked about, there's that scene which was mercifully deleted from the film where Mike hallucinates Miranda as
Mm.
the Botticelli Venus on the half shell, and
Mhm.
that poor actress had to be spray painted with gold and spent a terrible day doing that. But they tried it, and this is very Lynchian. I think that he was
Mm.
like, "Should we try this?" And they tried it,
Yeah.
and it didn't work, so they threw it out. So it was a failed experiment, mercifully. But yes, they're really running with that motif of her as Venus, and she's. I wonder if it's at all connected to the swan, which is such a symbol of her in the book, but
Yeah.
again is a much more active kind of embodiment of nature.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In the novel, Irma is the really hyper feminine great beauty.
Mm,
Right. Yeah,
Um,
I was just about to say that. Like that's I think that that's so interesting that and that's not to say that Miranda isn't a
beautiful.
beautiful girl,
Mhm.
but Irma is the one that when they talk about like who's like the pretty one, like who's the great beauty of their little group, it's Irma.
mm,
Mhm.
Like everybody, like there's so many lines that go on about and like passages in the book that talk about Irma's looks, and Miranda, that's not her, it's not a part of her character in the way that it is with Irma. And
mm,
I had been telling you, Hilary, that reminded me a bit of when we did our Lara episode. Like
Yeah.
that reminded me of how Caspery had talked about Lara Hunt, and that was like the sort of book written by a woman, movie directed by a man issue that we ran into with Laura as well, where in the film Laura Hunt is gorgeous. I mean, like,
Oh my goodness.
and but in the book she is described as like no like great beauty. Like, she's not, it's not that she's like ugly or anything, but it's just that she's not the beauty one. And it's kind of the same thing I think happens here with Picnic at Hanging Rock, where Miranda again is this more regular gal. And
Girl
then in
next
the
door.
movie it feels like she is elevated more in her beauty as a character. Like, it becomes more important to her character somehow in the film.
Yeah. She is very much the one that Mike fixates on
Yeah.
in both, though,
Yeah.
Hmm.
to an equal, at least an equal degree, if not more, in the book. So I
Definitely.
wonder what it is about her.
Well, one of the things I love about her in the novel is we talked about like the androgyny of the Botticelli angels,
Mm,
because the angels were male, right? But they have this
Yeah.
very youthful male, these very youthful male faces that look feminine.
Mhm.
And she also is between two worlds in other ways,
Mhm.
Miranda, because she is a bush girl. And I love on in the novel, it quotes her parents. At
Mm.
the age of 5, her father loved to remember, our Miranda threw a leg over a horse like a boundary rider. Yes, her mother would
Mm.
add, and entered my drawing room with her head thrown back like a little queen.
mm,
And so this idea that she's
Right.
comfortable in both worlds, that she belongs in the colonial drawing room, but she's
Mhm.
also extremely comfortable and competent in the landscape, even at age 5.
yeah.
Yeah.
She is different from the other characters in Picnic at Hanging Rock for that reason. She's different. She's not like the other girls. um,
I have so much to say on this.
yes.
One is boundary rider, and I would have to look up exactly what that job entailed, but it was patrolling the outskirts of a property. And when the International Art Biennale came to Sydney in the 90s, that show was called Boundary Rider, and that was the theme of it. So that's just such a rich metaphor because she
Oh.
is between, she's a boundary rider between the natural and the artificial. We've talked about the fact that she's a gate opener, and
Mhm.
I don't know how much of that is, if that's a feature of American landscapes, but I have struggled with those gates, and it's not easy to do gracefully. Where I love that description of her, like, just she knows when to jump off the carriage and go and open the gate and balance it on one hip and
Hmm.
gracefully do it. And I'm like dragging chains and picking it up and tripping over my own feet. So I definitely appreciate that that is a skill. Um,
And
I
Mr. Hussey really admires that in her
yes.
Right.
in the novel. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, she's a real boys' girl. I think she's got lots of brothers. She's the only girl in a family of brothers. So I think that's a real um, key factor in her personality. I do
Mhm.
need to just put a couple of caveats in the idea of her as being of the land, because I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure that her family own a big sheep station, and that's
Hmm.
the
Mhm.
source of their wealth.
Mhm.
And I've talked a bit about the erosion that sheep cause
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
the landscape. And also, one of the first pioneer settler families means one of the generation that were responsible for the first real wave of genocide. There's no
Oh.
nice
Mm.
way to put it. Like, those first settler families are the ones that came in and staked their claim on that land and dispossessed the people who were already living there. And
Oh,
there's only one way to do that, and it's the
God.
unacknowledged war that happened in Australian history.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a complicated
Yeah.
relationship with the land, for
Okay,
her.
but I love that
Mm,
because wow. Okay, because then it feels like Miranda is um taken back.
mm,
It's like the land is
Mm.
claiming retribution.
Like an
She's
eye for an eye.
mm.
yeah.
I don't think I've
No,
ever
I have a strong feeling that they're sacrificial virgins, all the girls that go
heard.
Mm-hmm.
missing. That there's a sense of that almost pagan bargain that with the land that's happening there.
Right. And if she's part of one of these first pioneer families, feels very appropriate that then that's who would be taken.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the apple of
mm,
her father's eye. It says at one
mm-hmm.
point.
I mean, again, this is why it is so great to have you, Melita, because to like give us that context. Because now I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah. I
I
love that.
really I can't recommend enough Kate Grenville's novel The Secret River. It
Mm,
was made into a TV series as well, and she did some research into her own family and found out that there was that very ugly past
mm,
in her family history. So she wrote this novel as sort of an imaginative response to that. Um, there are some just absolutely heartbreaking scenes towards the end of that book. There's some really affecting scenes of massacres in Peter Carey's Oscar and Lucinda as well, that really capture a sense of that. We should definitely
mm,
put a trigger warning on this episode for these
mm,
issues. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't even begun to get to grips with this as a nation. It's still this very ugly scar that runs through our society, not our history, but is very much still with us today.
In America, we similarly, but also differently,
yeah,
have our own genocide of Native American people.
There are
right.
so many
And
parallels in that history.
right, and then the legacy of slavery here.
Right. Yeah, that is like also a thing that is still like it's still something that we're grappling with and fighting every day because it still isn't we're still not at equal rights,
No.
which is so horrifying and disappointing, that in this year of 2026 there still isn't respect and
Hmm.
equality.
Mm,
Um, y- I like this idea of Miranda as a sacrifice for the sins of the father in a way,
mm,
then,
Mhm.
because now I'm thinking about Lara's appearance in the Golden Orb of Part
Mhm.
8. That she's generated essentially by the firemen and then kissed by Senorita Dido and
Mhm.
sent to Earth as a way of like healing this rift. Maybe that's one way of reading this, although there are many ways. Um, and that is she also a sacrifice in a way that
Mhm.
her the suffering that she goes through is somehow meant to I don't know to respond to this
Mhm.
offense against nature
Hmm.
that we have these sacrificial blondes who are innocent of in themselves
Hmm.
perhaps but somehow both texts see them as integral to addressing the offense. That Laura's there in response to the atom bomb detonation. And I don't know.
Um, it doesn't feel intuitive to me immediately, but I'm thinking about how there was a lot of speculation about the identity of the young couple in the 50s in episode
Hmm.
8, in the return. And there seems to be a fairly large consensus that that is Sarah Palmer as a
Yeah.
young woman, um, and and if she's right near ground zero of those nuclear tests, then there's a
Right.
sense that she's almost the sacrificial victim because she's such an
Mm,
innocent creature in that early
Yeah.
um, that black and white flashback.
Yeah, I mean, I think even I'm thinking too about like Audrey too. I
mhm,
think there's a lot of characters that are again like are paying for the sins of their fathers, which
Mm,
is heartbreaking, or just like the sins of man in general. But I think if we want to talk specifically through the lens of the father, we see that a lot with Audrey as well,
mhm,
in a variety of ways. And like I think it is absolutely a theme that runs through both of these texts. Honestly, again, more in the book, we get that a bit with Sarah too. I mean, there are many reasons again why Appleyard is targeting her, but I think, it definitely ramps up as her guardian is missing his payments
Mm.
and
Mhm.
stuff. Like Appleyard kind of takes that as like an excuse or the okay to become violent.
Well, then, with all of these girls that we're talking about, whether it's Audrey or Sarah or Laura or Miranda, suffering for the sins of the father, to go back to those poems that Joan Lindsay includes, the Wreck of Hesperus and Casabianca, that the children did not, and in both of those poems, the father figure is arrogant against nature, is
Mm,
like asserting human dominance over the sea, over nature, and the children are the ones who are paying the price through this ghastly death, or through some kind of suffering. In the case of some of our Twin Peaks characters, that like the offense, we could even see that with Audrey, that like Ben Horn's offense against Ghostwood. I really like in The Return when one of the things she says to Charlie is, "It's like Ghostwood here."
Mm.
We
yeah.
we could read that is that Audrey is absorbed by the woods at that moment.
Mm,
The way Jerry Horn is, that whole home that she shares with Charlie is like a hallucination of the woods. Anything is possible because it is so open to interpretation.
yeah.
It makes me think of when Josie. It makes me think of when Josie is absorbed into the actual wood of the
Yeah.
of the hotel, and I really like the theory that that's the strange noise that Ben is hearing in the hotel. That she's literally haunting the
Mhm.
essence, the actual physical entity of that building, which is, of
Mm,
course, made of wood, like everything in Twin Peaks.
Right,
yeah.
right. I think a good perspective on both Picnic at Hanging Rock and Twin Peaks, so perhaps comes from, again, Joan Kirkby. She wrote, "To uncomprehending humankind, these displays of natural forces suggest the presence of evil in nature.
Mm,
However, the earth itself is not evil.
yeah.
It is human violation of the earth that precipitates inexplicable occurrences in nature and eruptions of evil in human society." My own note was, though that was written about Picnic at Hanging Rock, it could be about Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
it's easy to read the supernatural forces at play in Twin Peaks are responsible for the evil. I like instead this perspective that it's the human disruption of nature that
Mm,
has created these eruptions of evil in human society and these responses from nature. That nature itself is not evil, but it is the human disruption of it.
right. Yeah, it's the human tainting of it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of media that plays with that idea because it is so usable. It is like, I mean, because it really is. You have to think about like the ways that these sort of actions would affect an environment. Like there are some that are a lot more obvious, and then there's the insidious sort of what's below the surface.
And it's very much a colonizer mentality that the land is there to be tamed,
Hmm.
and overpowered, whereas and it's a bit of a lazy cliche, but there is a real truth to indigenous societies living in harmony with the land and not taking too much from it, and that it's with
Right.
really from agricultural times onwards that it becomes this exploitative relationship, and then obviously ramps up with the Industrial Revolution. And that's actually a good point to mention another book that I wanted to bring up, A Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe, which is addressing the idea that Indigenous tribes were actually cultivating the land and managing it. And so there was a relationship there that was symbiotic. And so the idea that they weren't custodians of the land is just doubly insulting because a lot of that was just invisible to colonizers.
And that's another connection again with Twin Peaks, is that there is, I think, especially like with Hawk as a character,
Yeah,
I think it's important that we have him as a character to represent how important Native American culture is in our country, and especially when it comes to the land. Like Hawk's relationship with the land and the way that he's able to connect with it, I think, it's because like Native American culture has so much more respect and reverence for nature than colonizers all
yeah.
ever will.
And
um
I think that's why he's so close to the log lady who
yeah,
literally carries a piece of that nature around with her,
right.
and lives in the woods. And she's a
Mhm.
real gateway character who lives between those worlds. So that it
Definitely.
makes sense that she's on the same wavelength with Hawk.
Well, similarly to Margaret Lanternman being very sensitive through the log,
Mhm.
um, Joan Kirkby describes Mike in both the novel and the film as being, quote, responsive to the spirit of the land, despite the fact that he's an outsider. So Mike is coming from England.
Mhm.
He's only been in Australia for a short time. But unlike perhaps his aunt and uncle who he's staying with, who are really closed off from the
Mhm.
land, unlike Irma, right,
Yeah.
who's too European to connect. Mike is very responsive to the land, and that's part of why he feels the call to go and save the girls on Hanging Rock and can kind of find them, is that connection that he also has with the land, or the ability to hear its voice in a sense.
And actually, I'm just thinking now that I think that that is part of why he's unable to really form that relationship with Irma,
Mm.
and is still so fixated on Miranda, is because he can't relate to Irma as much. Like she's more like his aunt and uncle, and he is perhaps maybe more like Miranda.
Or he's
Um,
becoming more
He's
like her.
becoming, yeah, and I think that Albert is a huge part of that too. I think that Albert is sort of his guide into this way of life, because Albert is quite of the land, I think. Like I think he has, he talks about like knowing the area and being very familiar with the land. He's a hardworking guy. Um
Well, we love this relationship between Albert and Mike in the
yeah.
novel. Both of us do, Indigo.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a lot. And it introduced us to the idea of mateship
Mhm.
in Australian culture. But Melita has schooled me on this. I think we were looking at it from a very idealized point of
Yeah.
view, that it was this sort of golden friendship concept. And either we were just reading it from the rosy glow of far away, or it's changed in culture. So, do we want to talk briefly about mateship? And I won't sing the song from Keating the musical, although it's been stuck in my head since you sent it to me.
There are so many good songs in Keating the musical. And the roars of laughter from the audience gives you an idea of how accurate that portrayal was. But that's a whole other issue. Mateship. Okay. Yes, the kind of founding myth of Australian identity is such a blokey one. So that's sort of our version of the bromance. It's a very similar idea to that. Um, and again, it's one of those things that as an Australian, you grow up imbibing so much that it's hard to even put into words,
Mm.
especially for me, because I'm obviously very much outside it for a number of reasons. We're notoriously a sport mad culture, and its mateship is a big part of the sort of team building in sport. And even though we've got several extremely successful female teams that don't get nearly the same attention or funding, but that anyway, all right. So it's yeah, there's a lot to say. So I don't want to talk down the idea of mateship altogether, but it
Mhm.
is very much a boys' club. It's this idea of
Mhm.
male bonding. It can get toxic very easily for those
Mm.
reasons. And especially, I will bring it back to John Howard, who gets a song in Keating the Musical, Mateship. There's a verse in that about soldiering, because Howard was notoriously part of the axis of the willing. He was very instrumental in Australian troops being active in the Middle East, and we really got on board with the xenophobia and
Mhm.
Islamophobia, and we're still living with the fallout of that. And what Howard used in the service of getting the Australian public on board with this
Mhm.
idea was the Gallipoli. I don't want to say a myth because it's a real historical event, but there was notoriously, and this is a Peter Weir film as well as Gallipoli,
Hmm.
which is also about mateship, and it's about this completely doomed storming of Turkish territory. But yes, basically, the upper classes of British military, as happened so often in World War One, sent soldiers in to be slaughtered, and there were a lot of Australian soldiers at Gallipoli, and so for a long time, that was the story that was told about that, was it was just this completely senseless waste of human life, and that's very much the message of the film Gallipoli. And John Howard took that and turned it into a jingoistic inspiration for further bloodshed of innocent people.
Mhm.
And so that's the dark side of mateship. And I don't
Wow.
know if all of that is relevant,
Mhm.
but hopefully some of it is.
But I think it helps clarify why
Yeah.
we had such a, we're looking at this very pure, wholesome depiction of it in Picnic
Mm,
at Hanging Rock. And so we're feeling very celebratory of this idea, and you're exposing to us the reality of how
Right.
it's been used, right? How it's been
mm,
used in propaganda and
Yeah.
and twisted in a dark way. And absolutely, we can see where the potential for this to become toxic, even just on a small scale in
Right.
interpersonal relations. Um, I think, though, in Picnic at Hanging Rock and in Twin Peaks, we see really positive portrayals of this. What we maybe we should give it a different term, but let's just
yeah.
call it mateship for now,
Yeah.
um, because Albert and Mike's relationship bears so many similarities to the relationship between Cooper and Sheriff Truman in the
Sure.
original series.
Yeah, this level of like respect and care and camaraderie, just like the interactions that they have are full of just like so much care, like that, just the way that they look at each other and they interact and stuff. You can really see a lot of like devotion there, I think. And especially in Picnic at Hanging Rock, um that was one of the things that I felt was really lost in the film, is that relationship, because in the book it's so wonderful. They're so cute together. And it's not like they have a romantic relationship or anything. This is purely platonic, but it's
Mm,
so warm. The ways that they like look at each other, like if there's like a scene where they're looking at each other or something, it's like with so much tenderness and just adoration. Whenever Irma gets saved, they keep saying like, oh no, it was him, no, it was him. It's just like Mike and Albert like go back and forth being like, no, really, it was him. And like when they talk about each other, they just light up. And I think that the way that Lindsay writes their friendship is just so beautiful. They have such a great bond.
And because you saw the film before reading the novel, Indigo, you
Yeah.
said that, I mean, and I did the opposite. You said that you did not pick up on that kind of warmth between them in the film.
Yeah, I didn't. And then
Hmm.
and I would say on rewatch, I feel like I didn't either.
Yeah.
Because again, it was like, so I watched it, read it, and then watched it again, having that new context of having read the novel. And I yeah, so it was a thing that like surprised me in the book. And then on rewatch, when I was looking for it, because I was like, I don't feel like I picked up on this. Like, I think that they're friendly. I don't think that they
Mhm.
necessarily have, like, bad chemistry, but, like, in the book, it's so much deeper.
It's
And
very Cooper and Truman.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Even more
like
so because they end up together. That's actually the
I
love
know.
story with a
Yeah.
happy ending. Is they go off to Queensland together, and presumably they're working together on his property in Queensland for the
Right.
rest of their
Yeah.
lives.
That's their part of the pattern that
Yes.
resolves.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like through that friendship with Albert that Mike is Australianized in a
Mm.
Yeah.
sense. And I think we see that with Cooper too, that he becomes Twin Peaksianized. That's not a word. That should be. Um that he decides he wants to move to Twin Peaks. I mean, he's been there all of what, like a week? And
Right.
he's house hunting,
Yeah.
right? That he's ready to stay. He feels at home here. And a large part of that is that deep camaraderie with
Right.
Truman
Yeah.
that, I think that that's similar in a sense with Mike. And also this strange obsession with the vanished blonde
Yeah.
because both Mike and Cooper they're drawn in by the warmth of their mate,
Yeah.
but also by this fixation on the unknowable vanished blonde, Laura Palmer slash Miranda.
Right. And another connection that we had seen that you and I had talked about with Cooper and Mike is just that imbalance of status.
Hmm.
But there is so much mutual respect because it's like it would have been so easy for Mike to just look down on Albert and be like, "Oh, you're just the help." And it would have
Hmm.
been so easy for Cooper to come into Twin Peaks and be like, all right, I'm running the show here, like this is how it's gonna go. But instead he's so open to Truman. He's like so like willing to hear his process and engage with that. He has a lot of care and respect for how he interacts with him, especially as their friendship develops. Further the further their friendship goes, the more they're so clearly teammates working towards this
Hmm.
mutual goal. Um, and again, I think we see that with Mike and Albert too. It's like Mike really admires Albert, like
Hmm.
really thinks that he's such a hard worker. He thinks he's so cool, like, he's got
His
tattoos,
tattoos.
he's really interesting, and he's lived such a cool life. Like, he has this, like, reverence for him, but
Mm.
Albert is the same way with Mike. Like, whenever Irma's trying to talk to Albert and stuff, he's so, like, nervous and stressed out, and the one time that he kinda lights up is when he's when he's given the excuse to talk about Mike. He's like, they just go back and forth. They're just like, "No, really, it's him. He's the hero." And they just keep passing it back and forth. Like they have such a warmth towards each other.
So I'm I'm going to defend the film. I think it's all tip of the iceberg stuff. It's in
Mm,
little gestures.
mm,
There's a moment, and this is mentioned in the making of documentary,
mhm,
where Albert passes him a bottle of beer at the initial picnic, and
mhm.
in the film, he almost goes to wipe the lip of the bottle before drinking and then decides not to because he realizes that that would be offensive. And so that's sort of the first stirring of that egalitarian
Mm,
impulse.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that that's echoed in a moment that is in both the book and the film where they try each other's hats on. And
mm.
that's such a literal symbol of them trading
Yeah.
identities and being playful with that status, that difference in status between them.
Mm,
So I think that for me, I wasn't aware of that as a deficit in the film. I felt that it was
mm,
being gestured at in because
Hmm.
it is much less of a medium that relies on words, and so
mm,
it's all in the gestures and the images. But I think that I'm sorry to rain on your parade, but I think that that's actually something that's potentially unhealthy about mateship is that Joan
mm.
Lindsay says in various ways that they're both inarticulate in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Michael has had this public school education, the finest that money can buy, doesn't actually make him any more articulate than
Mm-hmm.
Albert. And that's something that they bond on, is that they really don't have a language to talk about their feelings very much. And
Oh.
I think that is it's
Mm-hmm.
certainly more explicit in the book, but I think it's also in the film where Michael, in that scene where they're swapping the hats at the garden party, and he's saying, here we are drinking bloody beer, and there's so much that he's
Mm-hmm.
trying to express in that, but he's
Mm-hmm.
just not able to put it into words. And I wonder if the fact that they go off together to Queensland, which is where Miranda is from. And it's
Right.
almost he gets to be with the ghost of his vanished blonde. That's the closest
Yeah.
he can get, is to be in that landscape that she's from. But he gets to be there with his platonic male love. And I feel like that's very Australian, that
Okay.
sublimation of, of romantic love.
Oh.
Mm.
Oh, that's interesting. That's not something I'm familiar with. So, can you talk more about that? The sublimation of romantic love?
Oh, I'm going to take this to a really dark place now. Yet more trigger warnings. So there's a book called Night Games by an Australian journalist called Anna Crien or Crien. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. It's Krien. She's very good. And this was
Mm.
about a case where there's no nice way to say this, uh, gang rape of a young woman at a
Mm.
after party after a rugby league match. She went to a room at this party with one player, and he took that as permission to bring the rest of the team
Mm.
in. And there's one of the things that Crayon writes about in the book is the idea that the love that these men have for each other, and there's a lot of homophobia in that
Mm.
blokey Australian culture, obviously. And there's a sense that the only way that they can express the intensity of this team bond that they have with each other is through the body of this woman. And so she
Mm.
just becomes sort of the conduit of that. So that's obviously a really grotesque
Yeah.
Yeah.
extension of that
Yeah.
to its farthest, darkest conclusion. But yeah, a sense of that bond being primary over uh, the heterosexual romantic bond.
Yeah, and I see that a lot in discourse among young women now here too, talking
Mm,
about how men perform for each other
yeah,
Yeah.
and that they honest I'm not saying I agree with this, but I hear this conversation a lot that men actually dislike women.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that they are they want a relationship with a beautiful woman as a status marker for
Yeah.
other men, but really who they are interested in performing for and appealing to is other men. Does,
mm.
Yeah.
does that feel similar to what you're describing?
Oh, definitely. And yes, obviously, we don't need to explain. Everyone knows the
Hmm.
ways in which that's emerging again.
Hmm.
In
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do do you read that in Picnic at Hanging Rock between Albert and Michael then? Like some degree of that sublimation that you described?
uh, I think it's I think it's significant that Michael is unable to get over his obsession with Miranda, because he and Emma do have
Hmm.
some common ground there, and they do spend that summer together. And to me, that there was a sense of the potential for a relationship there. And obviously, Mike is someone who could go anywhere and do anything with his life. And in
Right.
a sense, he does throw away a lot of his opportunities. So I think the fact that I don't think he ever comes out from under the shadow of that one
Mm-hmm.
experience. So I'm not going to say that it is unhealthy to the same degree. And obviously, that is a really beautiful friendship that they have. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm certainly not tarring it with that brush, but I think he fails to achieve his potential as a person, and I think that's an element of it.
And I think that's something he also shares with Cooper in
Mm,
my reading.
for sure.
And that I think that the relationship between Cooper and Sheriff Truman in the original series is really wholesome. Like I don't read any dark undertones there at all. And I feel like the loss of that friendship at the end of the original series when Cooper's doppelganger comes out, to me, that's like
Mhm.
one of the saddest parts of Twin Peaks. And the fact that we never see a resolution to that in the return, and we never see those two reunite is
Mm,
so sad. I
Yeah,
feel that loss much more than I do him not being with Annie anymore,
right.
although that's sad too.
mm,
Um, but there is a even though Cooper is so taken with Twin Peaks and wants to stay just as Mike becomes Australianized, it's not it's not all wholesome. Like it does sit uneasily even in the original series. The first and only house we see him look at is Dead Dog Farm. Like
Mhm.
that's really not a great sign for your resettling. There feels like there are dark undertones there. And
Mhm.
certainly by the return where Indigo and I have discussed it in other episodes where he pursues Lara,
Yeah.
breaking through time and maybe turning his back on love, as we talked about in our Four Quartets episode.
Right.
And then yeah, like this kind of reckless at all costs pursuing the vanished blonde.
Yeah,
Mike does the same thing. You're right.
he does.
He has this family name that's so emphasized in the
Right.
book that he's carrying this ancient family name and he has this ancestral property in
Right.
England. And the idea that he almost becomes trapped like a lost soul in
Right.
Australia. And he's going to go up to Queensland where Miranda was from. And he saw her for what, 2 seconds?
mm,
Right.
You know?
Like, I mean, well, that's like you and I had talked about that a bit, where it's just like he never has a conversation with her. It's not like he is entirely going off of this fantasy of her, which I
Mhm.
think we see a lot, not only in media but in real life.
mm,
I have had men like this in my life that they build up this fantasy, and honestly, who knows if he would have even liked Miranda if they actually got to know each other. But that's why it works for him, is because she can never let him down because he'll never know. And like
Mhm.
Laura is that for so many people. They have this fantasy of her. Even if they knew her and they spent time with her, they still have this very particular idea of who she is. It's that portrait that we always come back to. It's so easy to whittle a woman down to to a fantasy or a particular memory, once she's gone, when she's inaccessible. It's so easy to put that on her, I think, because they're frozen in whatever you want them to be. And so yeah, I think there's plenty of people in Twin Peaks that have this like glorified version of Laura, even though like, and like that's not to say that we don't love Laura, but like she is a complex, flawed individual. She is a human being. She's a human being. And Miranda is too. But Mike will never know that. And I think that's part of the allure for him. It's like easy to chase something that you can project this fantasy onto. He can just be like, oh, she's beautiful. She's like a swan. She's so mysterious. And I'll never be able to really have her, and so I can just keep lusting after this and longing for this or whatever. And yeah, I mean, again, it's just something that I think happens a lot. I think it's something that happens
yeah.
a lot. And I think honestly having this conversation about mateship, it like that lends to um I think that you made so many great points, Melita. I think that is a part of it too. Like it's so easy for them to like lust after this, and I mean, and in Cooper's case it's not lustful, but it's like, but like just it's so easy to focus all your energy onto, again, this like this fantasy and this goal of like, I don't know, like resolving this somehow, rather than putting too much thought into how you're interacting with your peers. I don't
Mm.
know.
And there's a real explicit comparison of both Cooper and Mike to
Mm.
knights, to medieval knights.
Mm-hmm.
And that really
Mm-hmm.
feel like, that's something that's talked about, especially in the Twin Peaks books about his white knight
Yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
syndrome, and you've talked about it on the podcast before.
Yeah.
And it feels like that is definitely Mike's sort of failing as well, is this idea of going and saving the girls, and he feels like he's failed because he doesn't bring back Miranda. Miranda's the real
Yeah.
prize, and Irma's
Mhm.
like the consolation prize, and he can't reconcile
Right.
himself to that.
And yet, I think that Joan Lindsay goes to a lot of pains to emphasize that Irma's not a consolation prize, that she's,
Mm,
Yeah.
in a sense, perfect for Mike.
Right.
Multiple characters in the novels say they're perfectly suited.
Right.
Even the gardener who's in touch with nature, right? And feels this deep regret when the two of them don't get together because
mm,
Yeah.
naturally they seem to fit. And in fact, we see in the novel that they really are, they're so comfortable with each other right away. They're very
Yeah.
in tune with each other and they come from similar backgrounds. And so there's no social obstacles to their union.
mm,
And it feels as though Mike is turning his back on nature, that
Yeah.
he is rejecting his right path, not just like socially right, but that would be naturally right or that would be good for his life. And
mm.
instead, he just becomes this trapped, lost soul in Queensland, like I said, kind of like
Yeah.
Cooper leaving Sonny Jim and Janie E. You
Right.
know,
Yeah,
if
I
we want
think
to
very
read
much
that
like that.
as a wholesome, like positive connection, and instead he's going to go to this Odessa world, you know.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
also just thinking, like, I don't know how wholesome of a connection this would have been, but I can also see a parallel with like James and Donna, with
Mhm.
like Mike and Irma of like,
Oh yeah.
like that could have been something like, like would it have been great? I don't know. But it's like they lean into that a little bit, but then um James isn't able to let go of Laura.
Mm,
And that holds him back, I think. Uh for a lot of Twin Peaks from forming a solid romantic connection with anyone else.
Well, that really makes sense because where we see James in The Return,
Yeah.
he he is this like lost kind of pining soul,
Yeah.
looking after
With his
Renee,
sad
right?
eyes,
Yeah, like
yeah.
bye, right? um, so that I think that works for me. That
Yeah.
yeah.
parallel as well.
Because so much of Twin Peaks, the town is in a form of stasis or
Yeah.
in loops, feedback loops when we come back to it for that reason, because it hasn't been able to evolve and move on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like echoing, just like a bruise or something, just sort of, yeah.
Mm. I really liked what you were saying, Indigo, about the idealized female as opposed to the difficult reality,
Mhm.
um, and the way that I've experienced that is mainly in the sort of manic pixie dream girl
Oh, yeah.
kind of form. And I was wondering if you've seen a film called Ruby Sparks.
I have.
I love that movie.
I love that movie so much. It is literally one of my favorite movies. And I love making people watch that movie.
Hmm.
I love especially making my guy friends watch that movie
Yeah.
and being like, I every time it gets to that scene towards the end when he's like frantically typing stuff, um,
Mm,
I I just like cry so hard because
mm.
it's so. Oh, man. Yeah, I love that movie. And
So
yeah.
very, very briefly for those unlucky people who haven't seen it,
Yeah.
it's about a young writer who has had a phenomenally successful first novel, and then he's having difficult second book syndrome, and he's been blocked, and his therapist tells him to uh, just write something bad. And I
Yeah.
can't remember if the idea of writing, this girl comes to him in a dream, to the young author in a dream. And so he starts writing about this fantasy girl who's so perfect. And she's very Zoe Deschanel coded. And she's riding a bike through the park. And she's wearing these flowing sort of retro 50s skirts. And she's just lovely. and then that character um, becomes real, and it's never entirely clear exactly. It's one of those fantasy films where it's like, just go with this concept. So she just materializes, and he realizes that he can actually affect her by what he writes. And so he's still writing this character, even though she's his real flesh and blood girlfriend now. And that gets darker and uglier as it goes
Mhm.
on. The scene that I really relate to in that is where she's having a day where she's just in a t-shirt and shorts, and she's just watching a marathon on TV with her hair all lank,
Mhm.
and she's just not putting any effort into being this fantasy girl anymore. And he's like, berating her to get up off the couch, and she's like, it's a marathon. And yeah, that for me is where it really embodies the difference between, because it's exhausting. You
Yeah.
cannot keep that up. And
Right.
I was just thinking when you were talking that there's a sense that Michael's idea of her as of Miranda as this swan and this emblem of grace is actually
Right.
quite different from the glimpses of her we get in the novel, where she's opening a gate and she's very physical. Or there's a
Yeah.
scene right near the end where the maid who's cleaning out her room is saying, she was never too high and mighty, and
Yeah.
she'd always have a
Yeah.
laugh with the servants. And so she's quite different from this sort of ethereal swan. And yeah, so that feels like the gap that he's refusing to acknowledge.
What's really interesting to me about that then is that Miranda we get in the film is more akin to this Mike fantasy of
Right.
her
Yeah.
than it is. So it's almost as if the Peter Weir's gaze on the character of Miranda really fits with this idea of her being this ethereal swan-like creature, this
Right.
fantasy projection. And maybe that works in a sense because so much of the film is focused on Mike's perspective
Yeah.
Mm.
of
Definitely.
Miranda as opposed to her just existing as a general character. But maybe that also contributes to the dissatisfaction that you and I felt, Indigo, with it, that we were kind of interested in Miranda as a more fully embodied character and less as this projection.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a really good point. I think in the movie when we're seeing Miranda, it is so idealized. Again, how I was saying with like Vera Caspery's Lara,
Yeah.
I think that it's a similar sort of situation where it's like you've got this complex female character written by a woman, movie gets made by a man. Maybe they do an iffy job on how they decide to portray that character. But I this was something that you and I had talked about, was that I think that is a thing where David Lynch is a little different. That's one of the things that he's well loved for, is his complex female characters, and also yeah, his general respect for women, especially the actresses that worked with him.
Yeah, and they are beautiful women, like some of the most beautiful women perhaps ever
Right.
to be on screen.
Yeah,
Mm.
literally. I mean, that's like a thing that people say about the show all the time. It's just
Right.
literally like, wow, most beautiful actresses you'll ever see in your life.
I think I recently saw a TikTok of a man who was like, "Even the viejas, right? Even the old ladies are the most beautiful women you've ever seen."
Literally.
Um, and simultaneously, we are allowed to enjoy their full beauty
Yeah,
and process them as deeply embodied, real, complex characters.
right. Right.
And I wish that was more common among male
Mm.
directors. It is
Yeah,
absolutely something that makes David Lynch special.
right.
Yeah, I think that was a real journey for David Lynch over his career, and I think it's interesting that um, he was so willing to grow and evolve with an idea of a character. So
Yeah.
Cheryl Lee was only going to, I don't think she was even going to have a speaking line. She was just going to be the
Mhm.
body on the
Yeah.
beach. And then the more that David Lynch got to know her, the more he gave her to do, and the more complex Laura Palmer became. And I think the masterstroke was allowing his daughter to write her diary. So you get this
Yeah.
really raw, authentic teenage girl voice. And that just, you can't ever watch it the same way again with
Mhm.
knowing all
Yeah.
that backstory. So yeah, I think that is definitely true of him, and I think that was something that he grew with
Hmm.
time.
We see that happen with Laura exactly as you're describing. She starts out as a homecoming photo and a body
Mhm.
on a beach. And then by the end of the return, she has this cosmic significance
Mm,
that people like John Thorne write about her as, the last avatar of Vishnu, right? So
Yeah.
we go from this incredibly superficial, flat portrayal to this deeply important, complex being, maybe even transcending, her status as a human being.
mm,
And I think that we, to some extent, see the opposite happen to Miranda
mm,
from novel to film,
sure.
that she takes an opposite journey of being very complex and rich and interesting to essentially just becoming that image. And I
Mhm.
know in the documentary that we've alluded to a couple of times about the making of Picnic at Hanging Rock, Anne
Mhm.
Lambert described, I thought with great humility, that like the popularity or the enduring image of Miranda, I guess, in
Mhm.
Australian culture and media had nothing to do with her, that it was just the repetition of the image in the
Mm,
press of
Yeah.
her as Miranda. Like every time Australian cinema was written about or discussed, that image would come back. So she, in a sense, detached even from the impact of that image and said, it's not me, it's just the repetition of this image. So
Yeah.
that's where I was thinking it is almost the reverse journey that Laura goes through in a
mm.
Yeah.
sense.
But yes, we were talking before about the fact that they have a lot of interactions with fans. Anne Lambert, I do apologize for not remembering your name earlier when we were talking about you.
Hmm.
She says that in that documentary that people come up to her even
Mhm.
now and will volunteer information about themselves that they would never have otherwise. So she's had a lot of unexpected conversations as a result of being this symbol for people. And I think Cheryl Lee has had a
Oh yeah.
different
Yeah.
experience of engaging much more directly with the issues that her character brings up for people. But
Mhm.
she certainly has had that experience of fans um, placing that significance on her because of a character that she played.
I
Right.
love that resonance between them.
Yeah.
Just,
Mm,
that it goes even beyond the fictional text. It goes on to the
Right.
actors who portrayed them,
Yeah.
that both Anne Lambert and Cheryl Lee have evoked something in fans over the years.
Right.
Like they're carrying
mm,
this story in ways that they probably don't even fully understand.
Right.
But
Yeah.
certainly with Cheryl Lee, she honors that. She
Right.
willingly shoulders that burden. Um, and and again, it is much more specific because it's women, usually women sharing their trauma with her. So
Right.
I thought that was absolutely beautiful, that connection with Anne Lambert and her reactions or her interactions with fans.
Right. Because it's such a crazy real life connection as well. Like we talk so much about things within the text and stuff, but it is always so interesting to see when things mirror each other even outside of the on the page and the screen.
Hmm.
So I was just going to uh, reiterate something I said near the beginning that like whichever version of it you encounter first, that's always going to be the template to some extent,
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
it's the book or the film. So yes, because I've lived with the film for most of my life and read the book
Yeah.
quite recently, they're for me mentally they're almost one and the same. When I
Mhm.
watch the film now, I'm just aware of all these subterranean depths, but I'm not aware of a lot of contradictions. And I'm not saying that they're not there, but
Hmm.
to me, it just feels like all part of the same thing. Yeah, but that's just a function of how I came to it and how you've come to it.
Oh, absolutely. So you process them as more one text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's not dissimilar to the way that younger generations come to
Hmm.
Twin Peaks, where there's no way of replicating the experience that we had of, like, I saw it the first time it aired in Australia and watching it week by week and and then that big gap and having that just become part of our DNA. and that's so different from coming to it as a fully formed adult or coming to it with this whole uh, lore that it's
Mhm.
amassed and its place in television history. You're just never going to experience it in the same way. But yeah, I think they're both valid and interesting.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point because I think the film Picnic at Hanging Rock came to me so hyped by so many people. And then when I read the book and fell in love with it, I that just amped me up so much more. And maybe that's the way young people watch Twin Peaks now.
Mm,
It's already a legend,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I haven't heard any young people talk about it being a letdown, but also maybe they know better than to say such things around me. Well, we have so many more topics that we could have discussed here in our episode notes, but it is now long after midnight where Melita is, thanks to the 14-hour time difference. And
So true.
also, who knows how long we've talked, how long this will be by the time we edit it, but it has been a delight, an absolute delight. And we should have mentioned this at the very beginning, but it's fine to bring it up now, that in June of 1999, Wrapped in Plastic magazine, issue 41, had two wonderful articles about Picnic at Hanging Rock and Twin Peaks and David Lynch. And we got that issue and we've all read it, and we did structure our discussion today in a way that we weren't repeating things that were in that issue. And so, listeners, if you are not familiar with that issue of Wrapped in Plastic, please go have a look at it. There are more things that those writers saw between these texts that are worth exploring and reading about, but we just deliberately didn't touch on them since that had already been discussed.
I'd also just like to
Yeah.
say that my take on Australian history and culture is to some extent my personal idiosyncratic take, and that please don't take this as the last word on those issues. So I hope you don't get angry emails from your other Australian listeners, because that's opinions expressed by Malaysia are not necessarily opinions expressed by all Australians.
No, but
That's so fair.
I think it provided a lot of really helpful context that we wouldn't have had otherwise. Like, I mean, even just down to how we were talking about, like, big spiders or, dangerous outdoors or something. It's like, we as people in the United States have for sure this idea of what Australia is, but like having not lived there or anything, like I'm never going to fully understand it in the way that you do or have the experiences that you have had. So your input and your context has been invaluable.
And also your experience with the film,
Yeah.
um, is being so different from ours. Just such a
Yep.
wonderful contribution. Also, just so fun to talk in person. And
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, not we're not in person. Yeah,
the
it's been
21st century version of in person.
yes.
Well, before we wrap up, I think it's important to note that one of the things that we have talked about in our email correspondences is that Melita has also been thinking about delving into the world of podcasting.
Yep. Any month or year or decade now, I'll get back into that. This was going to be the year. And then I started a graduate certificate in creative writing, which is awesome, but that has very much taken over my brain. So at some point, I do still want to do a Twin Peaks tarot card crossover theme um, podcast. And this is, I feel, a lot more emboldened to do that, having been a guest on your wonderful podcast. And it's been such a joy to be here. So thank you so much.
Thank
Well,
you so much.
thank you so much, and we are so excited for that Twin Peaks Tarot podcast that's still in the works.
One day.
Yes, yes, so wonderful. Well, listeners, our next episode here will be on the film Gilda. This is a film that features in Mulholland Drive as the
Mhm.
source of Rita's name. And so we'll be talking about the film, Rita Hayworth, and its connections with Mulholland Drive.
Mhm. In the meantime, if you're looking to get into touch with us, you can find us on Instagram at Full Blossom of the Evening. You can email us at fullblossomoftheeveningpodcast@gmail.com. And, we love hearing from you guys. This is how we got to know Melita at all. It was an email about some topic ideas, and obviously we really hit it off. So, and we used one of the topic ideas today. So yeah, please reach out. We love hearing from you guys.
And no obligation to be a guest.
And no obligation to be a guest. It can also just be idle chatter.
Yes.
We're also just happy to talk about Twin Peaks and David Lynch all the time. So
Yes. Well, thank you for listening to The Full Blossom of the Evening. And we'll sign off with
it was Laura, and she's come to kiss you goodbye.
goodbye, listeners.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
And I saw her glowing. I saw her